The Snyderverse divided fans, reshaped the DC universe as we knew it at the time, and it ultimately cut short. But what if it never was? Hello everyone and welcome back to AustinPlus Commentary, where today we are introducing a new, segment to this channel, What If? No, this is totally not based off of the show on Marvel called What If, absolutely not.
Well, no fucking shit!
But how this is going to work in the future is basically we have a question if something didn't happen or something did happen, and how would it have changed throughout the course of whatever franchise today. But right now we are talking about what if the Snyderverse was never cancelled. So the Snyderverse was cancelled late 2021 or early 2022, and the Snyder Cut released in the beginning of 2021 was one of the most well-received DCEU projects. So people thought they would carry on with that due to its big reception. However, we didn't. But why is that? And what would have happened if this wasn't the case? So let's get into it. So first of all, Zack Snyder actually started his contributions with the very first movie being Man of Steel. He is the person that introduced the DCEU. He moved towards the establishment of the Justice League, however he was unable to show his portrayal of the Justice League until later in 2021, as Zack Snyder had to come away from the DCEU for a long period of time, and then he released his segment of it. With the release of the Snyder Cut, it was far well received, and there was a big movement for the Snyder Cut after the release of the Justice League, because they knew that Josh Whedon and Zack Snyder's ideas were completely different. And after the critical reception of Batman v Superman, which is a combination of Zack Snyder and other directors, it wasn't the greatest introduction to Justice League, and it's not what Zack Snyder had in mind. Now, with that in mind, you have to understand what Snyder's vision was in the first place if he did carry on with his vision. More than likely, there would have been a tiny bit of a reboot, erasing everything that had happened before that, which wouldn't have been that bad because it's not even a decade long. If you erase that, that's not that bad because they weren't well featured anyway. But he wanted to start by establishing the icon of the DCEU himself, being the Superman, or the Man of Steel. I don't know why I said the Superman. Then a movie where Batman and Superman go head to head over a villain, which is a tough concept, but we move. And then a 3-part Justice League saga, the first of which the team unites against Darkseid, the first of which the Justice League unites and then Darkseid is teased. The second is the invasion of Darkseid on Earth. Now, the number 1 and 2 are basically merged into one during the Snyder Cut, and I think that's good, but we've never had the full ending to it. The Nightmare Future would have been had major deaths, which is probably what would have followed Darkseid and probably ended up in part 3. And the third and final part was going to be the final battle with Superman's son. So Lois Lane would have gotten pregnant and would have had Superboy or whatever. And a new Justice League would have formed, ideally probably the Young Justice or maybe a Teen Titans knockoff or whatever. But this story was supposed to be a much darker but a much more fitting than the others. And it would have matched the same mythological aspect of the MCU, and it would have been a very good competitor. Probably not as good as the MCU, but if you're basing off the now MCU, yes, it would have been a great competitor, but not at the time. Even with this, it is still tiny bit weak. Now, how would this actually affect the DCEU? Well, my friends, this would change so much. This would have meant we would have had no Justice League 2017 reshoot, and the reshoots were actually what made this thing absolute dog.
Oh no, gringe!
Instead of a 2-part saga that we got, we would have had a Batman solo movie where Ben Affleck and Deathstroke would have been the 2 key aspects of it. Superman's arc would have been much more cut short because they focused too much on it, and then too little on Batman, and it would have given more time for other characters such as Batman and all the other members of Justice League rather than rushing it in tiny clips. Darkseid would have been the big bad reveal in the end, very much similar to the Thanos arc in Marvel. And this would have been overall one of the greatest competitors with the MCU if they carried on with this. A darker cinematic universe is what we needed. I think a far more comic accurate Darkseid would have been good. Even the one we got was okay, but a comic accurate one would have been great. But you had was it Big Bertha, or what was the other, the great granny or something, and then you had Desaad. You knew all these characters, perfect setup for an apocalypse story or apocalypse series, which was stated as well. But all of this together would have been the first segment of the DCEU, and the Snyder Cut and the Snyderverse would have been so much better than what we actually got, which was a compilation of a load of shitty projects. Now, With the current state of the DC universe, with James Gunn now being the new manager of it, basically becoming the new Kevin Feige for the DC universe, would it still be worthwhile to have James Gunn involved if the Snyder Cut went through? Abso-fucking-lutely. James Gunn was a very good choice because of his reputation with Marvel, Guardians of the Galaxy, and obviously his contribution to the Suicide Squad, which was one of the best well received in the DCEU. And obviously Peacemaker, you can't really go wrong with that. That means you would have a good contrast of dark and light, but still holding strong with the story. If these two people stick their heads together in the future, I think it would be probably one of the most iconic collaborations. So, would the Snyderverse have saved the DC universe, or was it still destined to fail? Let me know in the comments below, and if you have other what-if suggestions, please leave them in the comments below as well. But without further ado, everyone, that is the end of today's very video, and I hope you all enjoyed it, and if you did, please leave a like and subscribe, and comment what else you would like to see on this channel. But without further ado, hope you have an amazing day as always, and I'll see you all in the next one. Bye!
Yeah!